Hello, good morning, good afternoon, maybe even good evening. I'm not quite sure where everybody is logging in from. Welcome, welcome. We're going to start the webinar very soon. I just want to give some time for people to file in to the Zoom room. And while we're waiting for everybody to come on in, you can see that little chat box down there. If you want to tell me where you're logging in from, that would be wonderful because I like to get to know you all a little bit better. Just go ahead and type in that chat box where you're from. Kathy is in Seattle. Welcome, Kathy. Richard is from Austin. Tim is from SoCal. Oh my gosh. That was a lot. Jennifer, oh my goodness. I didn't anticipate that much at once.
That's love right there. That's amazing.
That's love. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Good. Cheryl is from Wiley, Texas. Welcome.
Wiley.
Kimberly. Okay, wait. Yeah, exactly. Puyallup. Okay, I live in Washington and I have a hard time pronouncing this. But Puyallup, I think that's what it is. Washington. Matthew is from, looks like San Francisco. Nikki's from Salt Lake City. Wow, thank you so much for everybody for chiming in on the chat. Brad is in St. Louis. Thomas is in New York City. Excellent.
Right out to La Jolla, California. You still live there?
Yep. And then St. Petersburg, Florida. Anne Marie. Welcome, everybody. We are so excited to have you here. Thank you so much for typing in your location in the chat. It's wonderful to see, just wonderful to see where everybody's from all around and we even have Hetty from Ontario, Canada. Welcome. Kathy said Puyallup. Oh my goodness, that's rather embarrassing for me. I apologize. And then Amy is in from Phoenix. Wonderful. Another Ontario. And Casey's from Oregon. Excellent. Wow. Excellent. Excellent. All right, we're going to give it about 30 more seconds and then we're going to go ahead and start. Tom is in Breckenridge, Colorado. Welcome, Tom. Gail is from Losteen, Oregon. Welcome. Frank, Vancouver, Canada, just directly above us. Our offices are in the Seattle area here. That's where we are right now. Oh yeah, Vashon Island. Hi, Shannon. Excellent. And Stephanie says she's from Montreal, Canada. Very good. All right. Wow. That's a lot of you from a lot of different places. Welcome in to the Viome live event. We are going to go ahead and get started, and we are presenting the heart-gut connection. As many of you know, February is American Heart Month, and a lot of people suffer from heart disease around the world today. It's definitely a source of focus on health today. But what many don't know is that there is a connection between your gut microbiome and your heart health. And there's just a little bit that goes with it to understanding how to harness the power of your gut microbiome so it can help your goals for better heart health. And who better, to help me introduce this topic is then, of course, my trusty, or I'm his sidekick. He's not my sidekick at all.
No. We're webinar buddies.
ND, he is our translational science clinical expert here at Viome, and what an expert he is. And thank you so much for joining us on this call today, so you can give this very important information on heart and gut health out to our community so they can start putting it to good use. So the first thing that I want to start with is, of course, the basics. Grant, why is heart health so important? Do you want to take it away?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Lisa. Thank you, everyone, for joining us from all over the world, all over the country. We're happy to have you. I think everyone knows our vital organs are important, right? We can't live without them. That's why they're vital. We need the heart. We need the lungs, pull oxygen out of the air, pump oxygen and nutrients through our body. We need our liver our kidneys to control our blood sugar, to filter out waste products, right? But heart health is even more important, because if we're thinking about lifespan, we're thinking about health span, cardiovascular disease is a major player in the quality of our life and the quality of our health, right? Cardiovascular disease is the #1 killer, both globally and in the US. And while we might not all die from heart disease, we all die with it, meaning like every single one of us will have some degree of plaque development in our arteries when we pass, right? And that's kind of crazy to think about. And even still, cardiovascular disease kills 25%, a quarter of all Americans every year. Cancer comes close. It's right about 20%, right? It's a close second. But from there, you start to see real big drops down to single digits, 6% maybe for accidental death, 5% for lung diseases, 4% for Alzheimer's. But cardiovascular disease, it's a big deal. And so again, if anyone's interested in increasing their lifespan and improving their quality of life, we should be paying attention to heart health. And I don't mean just paying attention to your basic cholesterol panel that you get at your yearly physical when you go in to see your physician. I mean fine-tuning your diet and your lifestyle to be as preventative and proactive as possible. And that means stepping back from how we traditionally think about heart disease. It's not just about that high cholesterol, right? This is what Viome's interested in. We want to break down what upstream factors or measurable indicators can we identify for the early detection of heart disease, and how can we leverage nutrition and the oral and the gut microbiomes to prevent heart disease, so that maybe one day we don't all die with heart disease, or certainly from heart disease. And that's really what we're talking about today. We can go to the next slide. So the heart-gut connection, right? What does the gut have to do with my heart? Well, first, gut health is involved in our whole body health, right? It has an impact on so many different systems. It's far-reaching. It's our largest interface with the outside world. It's wrapped in immune tissue and nervous tissue. The signaling and the downstream immune effects, right? It really sets the tone for immune activity. So the gut, it goes far beyond simple digestion, right? It's really integral. But when it comes to heart health, there are a number of mechanisms that relate heart and gut. But I think if we're going to talk about the gut microbiome, we've got to talk about metabolites, right? Metabolites matter. What the microbiome does, its activity, it matters for our heart health, right? For example, like I think most folks have heard of butyrate. We talk a lot about short chain fatty acids, butyrate, acetate, propionate. I think we think of those for like gut lining and gut health in general, but really they act as signaling molecules. They actually bind to receptors on our immune cells. They bind to receptors on our fat cells, right? Our fat tissue is really a metabolic endocrine organ that plays a major role in inflammation, blood sugar control, and of course, obesity and fat metabolism. But these short chain fatty acids, when they're abundant, when they're being produced and they're coming into circulation and they're binding on these cells, they're actually reducing the production of cytokines. They're inhibiting NF-kappa B, which is a regulating factor involved in cellular stress and immune response. They really have an anti-inflammatory effect, not just from the molecules themselves, but again, from the signaling that they're causing downstream. TMAO is going to be another important metabolite. You might have heard of TMAO. Our microbes produce this TMA. They produce it from choline and carnitine. They produce this TMA gas, which then goes to our liver. We convert that. It turns into TMAO. It's a significant cardiovascular risk factor. It increases blood clotting and accelerates plaque formation, right? Those arterial plaques that really are the root of heart disease. And all that is going to be accompanied with increased risk for heart disease. Uremic toxins, P-cresol, indole, these are other molecules that are being produced by the microbiome. They, again, have an impact on inflammation. These inflammatory cascades, and not just locally, right? When we start thinking about the gut, we want to think about, and certainly heart disease, it's about systemic inflammation. And these uremic toxins contribute to that. Other factors, secondary bile acids, metabolites that the microbes, they take our bile, right? You might have heard of the liver and the gallbladder. We're going to release that bile to help us digest fats. The microbiome can then feed off those bile acids and convert them from primary bile acids to secondary. These two act like hormones actually, and affect signaling pathways involving energy expenditure, metabolism, inflammation. And then there's other things that just are purely anti-inflammatory, right? We're talking about the bad guys. You might have heard of LPS, lipopolysaccharides. These are being produced by gram-negative bacteria in our gut. It's really the translocation, the movement of this LPS from the gut into circulation. Again, like just starting this fire, talking about that adipose tissue and our liver health. This LPS sends that signal, lights that fire, and it has a direct involvement in insulin sensitivity, systemic inflammation, and the progression of heart disease. So there's a lot of granularity here. There's a lot of detail. It's complex, but the microbiome and the gut definitely have a direct impact on heart health. But it's not just about the gut microbiome anymore, right? Next slide.
Right.
We're looking at the oral microbiome, right? And a lot of people aren't even, it's not even on their radar, but oral microbiome has a direct effect on cardiovascular health. It's involved, going back to metabolites, it's directly involved in our blood pressure metabolism. We take nitrates from our foods, things like beets and amaranth. Our microbes are able to take that nitrate and convert it ultimately to nitric oxide, which plays a role in blood pressure regulation, the endothelial function, really about how compliant our blood vessels are, how they can stretch and move and adapt depending on stressful situations.
Wait. So the microbes in my mouth help regulate my blood pressure?
Absolutely. It's
Yeah.
like, what?
I know.
But yeah, they've even done studies with people that use, antimicrobial mouthwashes, these disinfectant style mouthwashes, and they really kill off all these bacteria in the mouth. What do we see? We see increases in blood pressure. It's phenomenal. And people are walking around, they have no idea. They're just, oh, this is good for my oral health. And certainly there's a time and place for those antimicrobial rinses, right? I don't want to knock them. They're a tool, but maybe isn't something we should be bringing into our daily routine if we already have, good oral health. But the impact, it doesn't stop there. The state of our overall oral health has a tremendous impact on our heart health. Inflammatory conditions like gingivitis and periodontitis, they contribute again to the systemic inflammation, not only from the upregulation of the inflammatory pathways, but also because they allow the movement of microbes and metabolites from the mouth across these, leaky gums, right? We think a lot about leaky gut, but it's the same situation in the mouth with the gums. And if that barrier is compromised, you've got these microbes and metabolites coming into circulation. They're not supposed to be there, right? Our immune cells see that, they trigger, they activate, they call the alarm. And again, you see this inflammation playing a role. And they even find oral microbes. They find them in plaques in our arteries. They find them in the tissue around our heart. Pericarditis, a big deal when it comes to oral bacteria making their way into circulation. So, dentists have been trying to tell us this for years, that oral health is whole body health, but the science is just catching up to these ideas, and the mechanisms that connect the two are just being uncovered. And luckily, Viome's got your back. We're expanding our knowledge of the oral microbiome. We're investigating ways to modulate it, work it into our favor. We actually have a standalone oral health test, a saliva-only test kit that's coming out soon. So look out for that this summer. We're really excited about it. Next slide.
Yeah.
So the effects of gut dysbiosis. Yeah. So what's dysbiosis? It's kind of this big nebulous term. Really, it's just a change in the composition of your microbiome, right? Your microbiome. It typically represents a departure from your baseline, some type of imbalance, right? We've talked about the microbiome activity and the metabolites, but if we zoom out and look at the larger patterns of microbial richness and diversity and the microbiome profiles that are associated with an increased risk for cardiovascular disease and even certainly metabolic disease, obesity, diabetes. It's really interesting. It's at its core, it's still about the metabolic activity of the microbiome, but looking at the level, like the relative levels and ratios of specific bacteria, specific genus species, it gives you some insight into how that microbiome activity might be contributing to your heart and metabolic health, right? And then there's the opposite, right? There's profiles that are associated with lean body mass and healthy blood sugar control, good blood pressure management, favorable cardiovascular disease. So it's really interesting. One day, I think it's really likely we're going to have functional gut microbiome profiles that are included as an accessible risk factor for heart disease, right? Right now, we rely on our age, our BMI, our cholesterol levels, blood pressure. But I think we're going to be able to use the microbiome to assess risk. I've looked at my microbiome. I've got the worst possible microbiome for controlling my blood glucose and for controlling my blood lipids, my cholesterol, my fatty acids. I contribute that. I've had multiple surgeries for injuries and lots of antibiotics. I've really, my microbiome's had a hard time. I've had a lot of fun, but my microbiome's had a hard time. But really that sets the stage. And if I'm aware of that, now I can make decisions to leverage that microbiome, to improve it, to modulate it, and then make other decisions in my diet, not only to do that, but then to reduce the risk for some of these factors. So knowledge is certainly powerful. We at Microbiome, we talk a lot about at Viome, sorry, we talk a lot about activity. But certainly we include some of these taxes scores, kind of the who's who of your microbiome. They're included in your scores. But just the ability for us to take it beyond that is remarkable. No other company in the world can do it like we can. We're a world leader in RNA, and it's really the power, the magic maybe of RNA to give us these insights into that activity. So we can start to dig into all this complexity, these metabolites, these ratios of bacteria, their effect on immune regulation and oral health. But we take that complexity and we try to break it down for you, right? We want to use a score system to simplify the microbiome, make it actionable, so we can identify dysbiosis and correct it, and really restore this protective functional activity and hopefully prevent the progression to disease.
Absolutely.
Next slide. So what scores do we use to assess activity, especially as it relates to heart disease? In your app, if you've ever done a full body intelligence kit, you're going to see in your health scores, there's going to be that overarching health score for heart and metabolic health, right? This is really our 30,000 foot view score. It represents the overarching results of all your scores for heart and metabolic health. If you don't look at anything else, this will give you an indication of whether the activity we measure is working in your favor or, is it working against you? It's a high level score. It's supported by 3 functional scores. If you're in your scores tab, you can continue to scroll down. You'll see your functional score categories. Inside there, you're going to see heart and kidney health, vascular health, microbiome heart health. And each one of these functional categories are going to be supported by pathway scores. So heart, kidney health, what are we looking at? We're looking at homocysteine pathways. Homocysteine, it's really a metabolic waste product. It should be there, but we should be recycling homocysteine and turning it back into beneficial nutrients, things like glutathione, neurotransmitters. But if this homocysteine can linger and accumulate, it's actually very caustic to the blood vessels. It's think of it as a free radical in a sense, but it's actually an independent risk factor for heart disease. But the good thing is there's a lot of things we can do to leverage that. We can hit that homocysteine hard. Another thing with heart kidney health is renin and angiotensin pathways. Blood pressure, it's controlled by many mechanisms, but diet and nutrition have a significant impact on this renin and angiotensin system. It's really a function of the kidneys and the lungs. But I don't know if a lot of people know how very important the kidneys are in regulating blood pressure. So I'm not sure if everyone's aware of that. But Viome, we're going to look at that activity, try to modulate it. Then there's vascular health. Under vascular health, we're going to have LDL cholesterol pathways.
Oh, wait, Grant. So does Viome measure my cholesterol levels? Because, what does the LDL score look at? LDL is a cholesterol, right?
It is a cholesterol, low density lipoprotein. You might have heard it called the bad cholesterol. HDL is the good cholesterol. I don't really like those terms. Not a lot of people do. That's kind of an old school way of thinking. the protective nature of HDL, it's really not panning out the way we thought. But we do know with LDL, those particles are the most pro plaque building, right? They have the propensity to get into, especially the smaller particles, work their way into that lining of our blood vessels and get embedded, where later they accumulate, and then they immune cells come in. There's this immune activation. You see conversion of macrophages into foam cells. It gets really nasty. But LDL cholesterol, it's really important. And this score raises a lot of eyebrows. So there's more to cholesterol than simply your cholesterol level, right? Certainly the amount of cholesterol you have in your blood, it plays a role, but it's not the only factor. And in fact, it might not be nearly as important as other factors that contribute to heart disease. Things like endothelial dysfunction, immune activation, oxidized LDL, microvascular changes, right? Especially the ladies, I'm looking at you. Microvascular changes are huge for females. You guys experience heart disease in a very different way than males. Even from the way you present with a heart attack is very different. So all these factors, clotting, platelet factors, it's really this soup of variables that come together and form this recipe for heart disease. And, if LDL is the salt, and surely you can lower the amount of salt in the recipe, but there's other ingredients contributing to the overall flavor. And this rings true for LDL and heart disease, right? So no, Viome does not directly measure your blood LDL, right? We're not doing serum tests at this time. But what we do assess many of these other factors, and it's important because there are a lot of people out there today with normal cholesterol, right now, that will have a heart attack today. In fact, someone's having a heart attack right now, right? It's really mind-boggling to think about. Every 40 seconds, someone in this country is having a heart attack. By the time I finish this sentence, there'll be another heart attack. Heart disease is real, and we've gotten better at prevention and management of heart disease. Over the last several decades, we've decreased the mortality from heart disease, but it's still the #1 killer, and that hasn't changed. And we need different approaches. We need better tools. And I hope that's where we come in. So we're not directly measuring that LDL, but we're going to look at all these other factors. We're definitely going to look at your LDL production, but all the downstream immune activation and oxidation of LDL and that endothelial function are all going to be incorporated to this score. And I've seen it where folks come in, hey, Dr. Grant, like I've got low cholesterol. I've had low cholesterol my whole life. Maybe I'm vegan, vegetarian, or whatever. How is it possible that I could have a not optimal LDL score? And again, it's not just about that cholesterol level. What else is occurring? What are these other downstream factors? What's your inflammatory status? All of these are going to have an impact on your LDL score.
Absolutely.
Let's move on. So that was vascular health. Let's talk microbiome health. TMA I mentioned, but there's also those uremic toxins. Both of those are going to be included in microbiome health. And then there's other scores that, they're not bucketed under heart and metabolic, but definitely have an impact on heart disease and that activity. Metabolic fitness, I mentioned earlier, how our microbiome affects our blood sugar and lipid control. Viome takes a look at that. Inflammatory activity of your microbiome, again, this idea that the gut contributes to the overall tone of the immune activity and contributes to systemic inflammation. Oral inflammatory pathways, taking it back to saliva and the oral health test, we look at the inflammatory activity affecting the gums. And like we said, gum disease, it directly contributes to heart disease through multiple mechanisms. Then there's things like butyrate production, that LPS I mentioned, and even uric acid production. Uric acid has kind of been in the headlines recently. There's new books out looking at the impact of uric acid on our blood pressure and our overall metabolic health. It's not just about gout. Uric acid plays a direct role in our cardiovascular health, which is very interesting. And a lot of things are like, oh, hey, you got to pull out high purine foods. Yeah, certainly, but I don't think people also understand the role of fructose, and it's certainly high fructose corn syrup in the production of uric acid. Anyway, the list goes on. Viome's got a variety of scores to look at your heart and metabolic health and your overall health, and it's really amazing what we're able to do and provide to you. Next slide. But what do we do about it, right? Get all these results like Viome, what the heck? I'm not optimal. I've got all these opportunities for improvement. What do I do? Viome, we really believe in the power of nutrition, both to regulate the microbiomes and gene expression, right? We've talked about this before with diet nutrition being an epigenetic factor in affecting gene expression. Nutrition is a powerful tool. Even more powerful is personalized nutrition. We've had webinars on this in the past. I'm not going to go into depth, but by the way, if you ever want to check out previous Viome webinars, you can go to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Viome. You're going to find a ton of content there. Go binge. But personalized medicine and personalized nutrition is the future, right? But you can benefit now from what Viome is able to provide. We use that personalized nutrition to target your specific microbiome activity and your genes to support the best outcomes, the best possible outcomes for you, right? Not the masses. So if your TMA is high, we're going to pull foods high in choline, carnitine. But those are great cofactors for mitochondrial function, right? But maybe we're going to pull those foods out, but maybe we need to bring in some mitochondrial support to replace them. And through supplementation, we can bring in CoQ10, resveratrol, PQQ. Your homocysteine activity is high. Let's bring in foods that are rich in B vitamins. Maybe we can supplement with some methyl donors, antioxidants to counter that effect of homocysteine. If we're not seeing optimal LDL, right? Going back to cholesterol, you'll likely see recommendations for anti-inflammatories, antioxidants, curcumin, citrus bergamot, great for endothelial function. And then, recommendations to replace saturated fat with polyunsaturated fat. It's really about the overall, I guess, I don't want to say inflammatory nature, the overall impact your diet is having on, LDL and your heart disease. And, a lot of folks say, I thought the myth of low-fat diet had been busted.
That's
right?
what I was going to say. Just removing saturated fat and high cholesterol is, and I've been a lifelong dieter, and I started out at low fat, no fat. I thought that was fun.
The 80s were horrible. Snackwells, the whole low fat diet. Yeah, absolutely.
200 calorie snack with low fat, right? Yeah.
A low fat diet is not the way. But because what happens? People pull out fat, but do they just keep on going? No. What do they bring in? They got to replace it. What are they going to replace it with? They're going to replace it with carbohydrate, sugar. Right. And it turns out sugar is even worse for heart disease. No, but bringing in fiber and replacing saturated fats with foods high in polyunsaturated fats, we talk about our omega-3s. That's the best evidence-based tool we have for reducing your risk for heart disease, having an impact on cholesterol levels. That's why we see just continuing more supportive data for things like the Mediterranean diet, right? Those are big kind of one-size-fit-all approaches. But we can take some of that information and leverage it in our personalized nutrition and incorporate some of those ideas. And the same with high cholesterol foods, things like eggs, shrimp. There's a lot of confusion about eggs over the years, but our best data, the best data we have, shows a direct dose response relationship with eggs, the number of eggs we eat, and the risk for cardiovascular mortality. The data is there. And all this means is the more eggs we eat, the more likely we are to experience heart disease. Now, I think there's more nuance there. I think there's more to the picture. And I think a lot of what's contributed to this muddy picture of eggs and heart disease, we all have a variable ability to absorb cholesterol. Some of us are high absorbers, some are low, some are high producers, some are low. But I think, this recommendation is important, and it's even more critical for folks that are high absorbers. Folks like me, I'm an APOE4. I run hot with inflammation, and I absorb a lot of the saturated fats and cholesterol from my gut. So until we have a score for cholesterol absorption, we take a conservative stance at Viome and make the recommendation to minimize or avoid these foods if we're seeing not optimal LDL score activity, right? And remember, it's the number one killer. Heart disease is the number one killer. We're trying to have an impact. So we're not saying you have high LDL. We're not saying you have low vitamin D. We're not saying you have heart disease. We're saying you have signs of activity that are known to contribute to the development and the progression of heart disease. And we want to provide recommendations to course correct that activity, right? And that's what Viome's about. It's about early detection. It's about prevention. It's about making disease optional. And that's really what we're trying to do. Yeah. That's all I got. I hope that's enough. Thank you all for listening. Hopefully I
That is,
didn't say too much. But what are we gonna do? We're gonna open it up to some questions, maybe?
yeah, absolutely. And I do want to say, the thing about eggs is something that I have followed a lot of my adult life, because I could eat eggs every day for every meal.
Oh, me too.
They're the
Love
most
it.
perfect food. But the idea, of course, beyond what we recommend, of course, is moderation. You should never eat so much of just one food. It's just your body's just not going to like it after a while.
Absolutely.
But it's so important to also have these indicators, so you know if you really like a specific food, what it will eventually do to you and your gut health and your heart health. It's pretty important.
And
And
it's not a life sentence either, right?
no,
This
exactly.
these are your recommendations for now. Let us modulate that activity. Let's have an impact. Let's retest. Let's see where we're at. Hey, oh, I'm back good. Let's try to bring some of those foods in. Can I maintain that? Can I maintain a good score with bringing these foods? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. But that's something that we continue to dial in with personalized nutrition as we move forward.
Yep. And you just monitor and you move forward, and it's a marathon, not a sprint. This is the rest of your life. This is how you need to eat to be well and feel well into your much later years, which it's not about lifespan, it's about health span. And it's like, do you want to live to be 101? Sure, but how are you going to feel when you're 101? That's the next question, so it's all good that way. And my husband and I do Mediterranean diet, but we absolutely put in our Viome recommendations there. Like if garbanzo beans are an avoid for us, we don't use them, but we do love following the Mediterranean diet. But we say there's no universal healthy diet, obviously, for anybody.
Sure, yeah, but there's themes and there's trends and there's ideas we can take away from some of these more generalized diets, right? Especially something like the Mediterranean diet that's gonna, when it comes to nutrition, it's just like the microbiome, it's complex, and we really don't know a lot when it comes to nutrition, as a species. But there is evidence for certain themes when we look at it, and Viome wants to take that evidence. We want to build our own evidence. We want to take that, combine it with the microbiome, with your gene expression, and really bring all these factors to give a best case scenario, a best personalized, tailored fit approach for you and your biology. And I think that's really cool. We're just getting started, but we're already, we've got cancer detection in saliva that's been approved by the FDA. We've got our testing, that new product with the oral health I mentioned, trying to bring that out to the dental health, oral health community. We're making strides, and it's a lot of fun. And just to know the impact that we're having on people's health and their lives, it's a dream job, right? It's amazing.
Absolutely. I can see where this could definitely be a dream job for you, Mr. Nutritionist, for sure. I do want to get some questions answered, and I'm looking through the questions, and right now at the top, I'm going to pick out what are related to the talk, and then if I can go back and do the other questions, I can do those too. So Doug asks, is there a respiratory microbiome? I think that's a very interesting question. Could bad actors in the oral microbiome reach the heart via the lungs?
Yep, absolutely. There's a respiratory microbiome. This isn't an area we've deep dived into, but certainly it's on our radar. I don't know how much work has been done in this area to know if the actual microbes are reaching the heart. I have to assume they are, because we know microbes from the mouth and the gut are able to translocate. So absolutely, I think there's going to be some connection there. But even far beyond that, the lung health and heart health are so intertwined, right? When you talk about congestive heart failure, pulmonary disease, that pulmonary fibrosis, where you start to see a thickening of the lungs or inability to expand and contract, that puts stress on the heart. Right now, the heart has to push through that, to push the blood through, to do that gas exchange and bring it back out. Those lungs make it harder on the heart, and then eventually you see hypertrophy, the enlargening of the muscle in the heart. But then eventually it becomes flaccid, weak, and you see less output from the heart, ejection fraction, and then that has an impact on your liver, and it's kind of like domino effect from there.
It's
but yeah,
all
absolutely
connected. It's all connected, absolutely. So don't let this happen to you. pay attention to your diet, make sure you're getting your movement in, your exercise in, especially the cardiovascular as well. So, all right. So another microbiome question. Clinton asks, does the oral microbiome change much more than the intestinal microbiome?
Does it change much more? Yeah, I would say there's a much more temporal pattern. The foods that we're bringing in, those foods, those substrates are right there immediately. And so you definitely see changes, and there's also effects with circadian rhythm, hormones. So a lot of turnover, and especially we're much more mindful of our oral health, right? So we're coming in, we're scrubbing, hopefully we're brushing, we're flossing, the mouthwashes I mentioned earlier. So you see this kind of temporal flow of the richness and diversity of the oral microbiome as we bring in oral hygiene and through different parts of the day. Much more so, like we're not getting in and scrubbing our colons. Although there's some folks out there that do a lot of the colon hydrotherapy, but I don't know that I recommend that. But yeah, I'd say there's much more change.
Yeah, I don't know about that either. It's probably better to set your body up to do what it needs to do naturally rather than trying to jumpstart it, unless a jump starting is necessary, but that's up to you individually for sure.
Yeah, and there's also this different idea, right? I'm kind of talking more about the overall richness and diversity of the microbes that are there, but the actual functional activity we see that's not as erratic, or it's not fluctuating as much. It takes some tools, it takes some time to get in there and impact the oral microbiome, just like the gut. Like if we're going to leverage it, it can certainly be done, but it takes a little more time than simply these kind of temporal changes that we see to again affect that both the composition and the activity of the oral microbiome to promote good oral health and good systemic health. But yeah, we can do that for sure.
All right. Okay. Real quick question from Melinda. I can answer this. Please tell me the type of test you should order for the vascular health. And that would be our full body intelligence test. Okay. So that does take samples from your gut, your cells via blood, and then your oral microbiome via saliva. And that's where you can get this in-depth look at insights into your heart health that Grant just went over. So the next one.
Let's see, I'm digging through. What can we find?
Do you see one in particular? I was thinking about, there's another one on the heart health score. But if you
I see one from Camille. It says, I was advised to take HCl supplements to help with digestion. Just realized from the few things you mentioned, betaine hydrochloride is trimethylglycine. Yeah, betaine, absolutely. Betaine's TMG. Trimethylglycine, it's a methyl donor. It helps with homocysteine. Really that methyl group gets placed on the homocysteine, which kind of runs it up the pathway. So I mentioned recycling. It puts it down that pathway so we can recycle it. It's really important when it comes to things like glutathione biosynthesis, and you might have heard of MTHFR and the point mutations with MTHFR and folate, these kind of things. Homocysteine, TMG, methylated B vitamins all play an important role there, Camille, for sure.
Excellent. So there are a few people asking, is there going to be a recording of this? And yes, so everybody, you registered for this webinar, obviously you're here. So everybody that registered will get a follow-up email tomorrow with a link to replay the webinar online. So don't worry, you can go back and rewatch it to your heart's content, as well as the other webinars that we've been doing for over the last year. It's pretty exciting.
I see Barbara Radke's, I think it's
Yes.
Radke, I hope I'm not mispronouncing that. It's a basic supplement question. Why am I supposed to take 2 packets a day? Can I take them at the same time? If so, is there a better time of day to do this? Can it be on an empty stomach, or is with food better? I'm not sure what she means by the 2 packets. Maybe certainly we've got our capsule ingredients that come in 1 sachet. You're going to have 8 capsules there, and then you're going to have your stick pack if you're doing the complete precision supplement.
That might be what she means.
Yeah. Or you might be talking about the 8 capsules. We will often recommend you take those 8 capsules, split them into 2 doses of 4 capsules. We do want you to take those with food. So ideally, the best case scenario, you can take 4 capsules with breakfast and 4 capsules with lunch or dinner. But that's a doctor's dream. We know life's hard, dosing's hard. Often folks they forget that second dose. Carrying around the 4 other capsules can be difficult. You can take all 8 at once, so whatever time of day it is. The only thing you might want to be mindful of is if there's a considerable amount of B vitamins or stimulating supplements in your formula, you might not want to take that too close to bedtime. But otherwise, with food, is going to be great.
Yep, absolutely. A couple of egg questions, which I like. So Hetty says, and the personalization will include the fact that we may need to cut down or cut out eggs. Yes. So if those conditions are found in your test results, they're connected to these elements in eggs, you will be shown that you should minimize or avoid. And then Pascal asks, eggs, is it just that the yolks increase your heart disease risk? Do you want to tackle that one, Grant?
Yeah, it's about those yolks. That's where the cholesterol that's going to be. The whites are going to be, egg white protein. Yeah, so definitely those yolks, if you want to pull those out, if you want a clean source of protein and high sulfur, right? Good for NAC and helping with our detox and liver biotransformation pathways. Eggs are huge. I love eggs. Right. But for some of us, we gotta watch it a little bit. And that's okay. And I always get pushback on this. So if you guys go to the American College of Cardiology, their website, you can go to their search. I think you can just search egg and they'll have a couple of studies that'll pull up and you can see the data for yourselves. That's going to be the latest and let's say greatest data that we have on dietary cholesterol eggs. So just don't take it from me. It's out there.
Right. So related to that, Jane asks, can you comment on the importance of choline? Because choline is in eggs. Am I right about that?
Yep, phosphatidylcholine.
Research shows people need 425 milligrams a day. And she says that her Viome supplements don't include any. So that's probably a good point to talk about.
Yeah, choline come through the diet, it's really common, and so I'm not sure about what our actual intake is, but I would suspect for your average American, you're not going to have any problems hitting that level of choline in the diet. I'm not sure why your supplements don't include any choline. We have 2 supplements actually that are involved, phosphatidylcholine, and we have acetylcholine. We also have some phosphatidylserine. It's kind of involved as well. But it might be that you had a not optimal TMA score, and that's why you're not seeing recommendations for choline, or simply that the AI, there were other ingredients it deemed to be more important for you at this time, and that phosphatidylcholine just didn't make it in. But certainly you're going to be able to get that from a variety of plant-based foods, animal-based foods, things that are rich, and then even like soy lecithin. You're going to see soy lecithin is used as an emulsifier. It helps things make processed foods smooth, and gives them a nice texture. You'll see that as an ingredient in a lot of foods, and that's a rich source of phosphatidylcholine. Even folks will supplement with soy lecithin as a kind of the poor man's way to get in some choline, especially if you're vegan, vegetarian, you're trying to avoid meats, which are a great source of choline.
All right. Excellent. All right. So let's see. I wanted to I know there's some really interesting questions here. I'm just trying to find what the ones would give the most benefit to everybody. So let's help Lynn out. Lynn says, I just got my Viome results back and found that most of the foods I have been eating are on the avoid list: cruciferous vegetables, egg yolks, and all meats. And when I have been told by my nutritionist, I believe that's a nutritionist, to not go vegetarian, I am confused. So she shows, it just seems like what happens sometimes is people have a bunch of things that they've relied on for their nutrition, told that they should avoid. So that they're just looking for a little bit of guidance. And of course, the first thing that I can say to you is that will not be permanent. You know, as you go on, as you retest, things can float around to different lists. So don't worry about that. But Grant, do you have just a couple words of advice for Lynn?
Yeah, well, first, I just want to highlight the fact that her doctor said not to go vegetarian. That to me is interesting, and I would want to question that, right? Because we know a plant-based food, plant-based diet absolutely has advantages when it comes to the microbiome and our overall health. Certainly, there's kind of this religious aspect when it comes to nutrition. You see a lot of folks really entrenched into vegan and vegetarian or into carnivore diet, ketogenic diet. Again, it kind of becomes this dogma. So I might have a conversation with that physician and say, hey, like, what are the reasons you wouldn't recommend that I go vegetarian? Maybe there's some insight they have into you, Lynn, that I'm not aware of. But certainly, vegetarian diets are great, and they're also a great tool. You don't even have to go vegetarian like your whole life, but bring in vegetarian meals or use, maybe I'm going to go vegetarian for 3 months and see how I feel in my body and look at my labs and see what impact it has on my physiology, my microbiome. So it's yeah, I might have a conversation if I were you. Yeah, I'm not sure what else to say there. Let's see.
Well, definitely, Dina. I mean, that sounds reasonable to me. Sorry, not Dina. I apologize. Lynn, go back to your nutritionist and have a conversation with them about why, what are the reasons why, what should I eat, what shouldn't I eat as far as meat is concerned. Maybe they're saying proteins that are not animal based, that could be it as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can I ask? And there might be something going on that, I don't know your case. I don't know your health history, but there might be something underlying. Maybe you have some pernicious anemia or iron deficiency anemia, so that they don't want you to go vegetarian because animal foods can be such a great source for those nutrients and to support that condition. There's other health conditions that I could think of a logical reason for why I might not want someone to go vegetarian. But again, it's all about risk benefit, what's right for you at this time. And your doctor should be able to walk you through that and explain their logic and why they're giving that recommendation. And then, it's up to you whether you want to do it or not, right? So you can say, hey, well, I appreciate your input. But I think for me and what I'm feeling in my body, and maybe I'd like to try this, and how can I do this in a best possible way? Because it's not just about, it's a dialogue, right, between you and your physician. It should be, you should be informed. They should be a resource for you. Certainly Viome, we try to be a resource for our customers. We're constantly trying to educate. That's why we have so much content in the app, online on our website and YouTube. We're here to educate and support you because there's so much information, right? And there's a lot of bogus information. But it's all about dialogue and deciding what's best for you moving forward. I see this question from, I don't want to mispronounce, but Chidvir, I think, is saying, I heard omega-6 are bad. Oh, I thought that said omega-3. Omega-6 are bad. Is that correct? Good, bad, those are kind of, black and white. Those are kind of extremes. Omega-6, the thing with omega-6, we have a ton of omega-6 in our diet already, right? Especially through the oils and things that come through processed foods and fast foods restaurants looking for cheaper oils. Nuts can have high levels of omega-6. It's not that they're bad, it's just there's a lot of it, and they don't have all the benefits of omega-3 fatty acids. So a lot of times people are like, oh, nuts are going to be a healthy source of fat. And they are, but some nuts are actually very high in omega-6 versus omega-3. So you always want to be saying, well, okay, well, what's the omega-6 to 3 ratio for my nuts? Really, macadamia nuts, pecans, and walnuts are the only nuts I'm aware of that have a positive omega-3 to omega-6 ratio, meaning that they have more omega-3s than omega-6. We consider that to be a net positive. So always trying to reinforce, and it's not that almonds are bad. Almonds are high in omega-6. But if you're looking at your diet and you're seeing a lot of omega-6 in there, we want to diversify. We want to get that omega-3 in. And that's really the idea behind that.
All right. So Sonia has a question about oral health. She's asking, what about the tongue? I read an article suggesting a direct correlation on tongue health and the heart. I have been struggling with recurring white tongue for years now and have received no answers. It especially happens after I take a probiotic. My mouth and gums are very healthy. So that's interesting. So when she says white mouth, does that mean like thrush? Does that mean on the tongue?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm not exactly sure what she means, because that could mean a lot of things. Certainly, like you mentioned, candida, overgrowth, thrush. It's going to be rare for folks that walking around with normal, healthy immune systems. But there certainly could be a little more yeast in your microbiome or more candida, right? I'm not real sure what's going on there, but certainly we were talking about bacteria that take that nitrate from our foods and help us convert it to nitric oxide and have an impact on our blood pressure and our blood vessel function. A lot of those microbes like to hang out on the back of the tongue. So maybe this is what she's heard about in that correlation between tongue health and heart health. Some folks will scrape their tongue. I don't know if you've seen tep scrapers. It's kind of used as a oral health hygiene regimen. I do tongue scraping. I don't know if you're working that in, does that deplete the number of these microbes? No, we were talking about those temporal fluctuations in richness and diversity. Overnight, we go to sleep, we brush our teeth, floss, scrape our tongues, and you wake up the next morning and, oh, hey, look, now I've got a new coating. That's just the bacteria. They're just proliferating. They're doing their things. They're feeding on the nutrients that are available in our saliva and on the, those particles that are on our tongue. It's not necessarily pathogenic activity or disease activity, but just a natural occurrence, right? And I think some folks do have a propensity for more coating than others. I think there's a lot of variables there with the amount of saliva, hormones, and more. But it's good to know that her gums and mouth are healthy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Let's see, we are about at time. I would like to do one more question. One I will address first. Holly asks, when would there be a retest? And I believe, Holly, what you're asking is, when should you retest? And of course, what we recommend for everyone is 4 to 6 months after you get you've implemented your recommendations. But of course, listen to your body, listen to what's going on. If at the beginning you responded very well to your superfoods and what you were avoiding, that's great. But then on down the line, maybe you don't respond as well. It might be time for a retest. But it's very, very important to listen to your body, especially after you eat your meals. How am I doing? How did that do with me? And then you can gauge when you should retest. But I've seen a couple of questions about gallbladder, at least 2 or 3 in here.
Yeah, I'm looking at one now, actually.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and do that one? And that can be our last question for the day as we wrap up.
Yeah, I think this is Layla. Hey, Layla, how does not having a gallbladder affect gut health? Well, the gallbladder is supposed to be there, right? We want to have our organs that we were born with. So let me step back. The gallbladder, what does it do? It's really just a reservoir for bile. The liver is producing this bile. And why is it producing that bile? Well, a number of reasons. One, cholesterol metabolism, right? The liver will take excess cholesterol, it'll push it into bile and try to get rid of it and push into the gut. So we poop it out. It does the same thing for toxins. We're trying to eliminate, hormones, medications, these exogenous molecules that we're trying to filter out of the blood. The liver will try to conjugate that, put it into the bile again, so we can put it into the gut and poop it out. And then there's just the pure digestive aspect of bile. It works as an emulsifier, I guess. Like it's like your dish soap that helps break up that fat and get the greasy mess off the plate. Bile acids do the same thing for fats and help us really digest those fats. And it's interesting with fats because we actually form these chylomicrons and they don't continue to travel down the gut to the colon. We actually absorb those. We absorb fats through our lymph system. That goes into the lymph and actually it comes into circulation just above our heart. And so the heart has this one-way valve of fatty acids coming in through these chylomicrons that are formed with the bile salts and the fats. So it's got a primary fuel source, right? Those mitochondria are looking to burn those fats for energy. that keep our heart pumping. It's really interesting. So going back to gut health, if you don't have a gallbladder, the liver is pushing all this bile directly into your gut. It doesn't have this reservoir to collect it and contain it and then hold it until we eat some fat. Our brain and our digestive system detects that fat, and then now the gallbladder squeezes and releases that bile to help us digest. Instead, you're constantly, there's no reservoir, right? You've taken the gallbladder out, you're constantly pushing this bile into your gut, whether there's fat there or not. Now that can be a problem in some folks, right? All those toxins and things I mentioned, they're getting just dumped into the gut at all times of the day. And so if you have issues with, I don't know, hormone, heavy metal toxicity, really autoimmune disease, all these toxins are getting dropped into your gut at all hours of the day with nothing to bind them. Remember, when fat's there, usually other foods are there too. So now we got fibers and things to help capture those toxins that the liver's pushing out, bind them, and then again, poop them out. But if there's nothing there, now these toxins and this bile acids can have an impact on the microbiome. And we talked about the microbiome being able to convert those bile acids from primary to secondary. There can be local inflammatory effects due to that, and then certainly the downstream inflammatory effects we talked about. So it's kind of case by case, and you talk to your doctor and how to manage that. Viome, we have some bile acid scores incorporated into our results to give you an indication of the microbial activity that we're seeing. But if you don't have your gallbladder, certainly you want to think about ways to bring binders fiber in on maybe a little more regular basis to help bind some of those toxins and biles, and support, because that bile acid too, if there's not food there, that bile acid actually can irritate the gut lining, and cause some problems, IBS, these kinds of things. So it's one piece of the puzzle, but definitely an important piece.
All right.
That was a lot. Sorry.
So
Love
much
this stuff. I could talk all day.
So much good information. Well, I just want to thank Grant for joining us here today and lending us all of his expertise on nutrition. Thank you so much for taking the time to put together this presentation. And thank you, and sharing some answers with our audience here. So before everybody leaves, I do want to let you know that I am offering a code for a discount on our tests. If you're ready for a retest, or if you just want to get a test for a gift for somebody else, you just need one, use the code FEBWebinar, and that will give you up to 45% off the original prices on any Viome test. And just in case you go to the website today, you will see that we're having a promotion on our plans today that you can get 20% off for 2 months. And the codes are on our website right now. So if you're ready for supplements, you can do that as well. But again, thank you everybody for taking this time out and joining us today. We will next month be back with another webinar, and you'll see the invitations coming to your in your email box. Register those, and then come and join us again live. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Grant. I really appreciate this, and I think that's good. I think we're good for this evening. All right. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day, everybody.
Bye, guys.